Welcome to No Room for Phonies. We're back with episode 52.
Hello.
Right? That's a lot.
Episode 52.
So we're going to start talking about shame, which is a twin of vulnerability is part of it too, right? And so our topic today is, what do we know about shame? And
as in you and I.
As in you and I.
Yep.
And we've done we got into Brene Brown, and that's where a lot of our information and learning is from, but then we added our own little twist to it. But we'll start out with the cocktail. We haven't tried it yet, the honeycomb, which is ice cubes, vanilla beans, honey vodka, vanilla vodka, and sugar syrup. So I'm sure between now and Christmas we will
absolutely
try, because you like vodka. So
I like honey.
And
honeycomb.
And honeycomb. So, and vanilla beans. So, and then the books that I want to recommend this time are Ambrose Perry, which is a pen name for a husband and wife team. And they've written a series of books that are gripping historical crime novels set in the 19th century in Edinburgh. And the husband and wife team are Chris Brookmere and Marissa Hetzman. Anyway, There's 4 books in the series, actually.
Four?
Yeah, I've read the first one, and I'm started the second one.
And I'm started the first one.
The first one is called The Way of All Flesh, and he is actually the sort of main character in the story is a doctor, like in training to be a doctor. And then there's The Art of Dying, A Corruption of Blood, and Prayers of the Dead, a medieval mystery. So anyway, if you like mysteries, it's this. If you like mysteries, I would highly recommend this book. We're just turning off the iPad so that it doesn't do any beepy things. But just a really, really fun series of books. And I got them at my local library, so I'm sure you can do that.
I'm sure.
And then my recommended podcast this time is we listened to Barack Obama and Brene Brown talk about leadership.
Yeah, it was very good.
It was just really, really interesting. So if you're wanting to listen to that, it was really good. So
yeah, I mean, despite their celebrity status or whatever you want to call it, or well-knownness, they both were pretty down to earth, I think. And,
they're just like they were having a coffee. I mean, everything is on Zoom right now, right? Because it was recorded a while ago.
It was during the pandemic.
So they weren't
lockdowns,
together in the same room or anything. No. But it was excellent. So, and then the question to ponder is, how do we find out who we are without labels? So when somebody says to you, "Who are you?" do you say teacher, father, son?
All of those are labels.
All of those are labels. So who are you?
Who are you without labels?
Beyond the label, your principles, your virtues, your
inner compass,
your values, those kinds of things. So anyway, I ponder that a lot, and so I just thought I'd put it out there for you to ponder as well. So what do we know about shame? So Brene Brown's definition of shame is that shame is an intensely painful feeling or experiencing of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. It's an emotion that affects every single one of us profoundly and shapes the way we interact with the world.
And I would add that it happens in a lonely situation. When shame is happening, you feel
isolated.
That it's just you.
You feel isolated.
At the moment, especially, it's like you're all alone.
Yeah. So I just made a list of things that have made me feel shame in the past, and
I'll chip in.
You can add your whatever things other than that. So parenting, we all feel.
We both.
You're out and your kids do something and you're just
mistake.
or you make a big parenting mistake. The way we look, I think we can all identify with being ashamed of the way we look, or your hair, your weight, your this, your that. Particularly young girls, right? And that's a whole thing.
I think
and
boys
and
too,
young boys too.
They haven't been given the same amount of like airtime. It hasn't
Yeah.
been. I think they even bury it further.
Money and work is a huge place for shame to
shame.
become a thing. Lack of status is shame. Like, I know in the past when, we were struggling more with finances when we were younger, and then we would be around younger couples who seemed to have a lot of money, whether they did or not, or whether they were just more comfortable with debt.
Yeah.
It made you sometimes feel ashamed that you couldn't
do certain things
or you weren't doing certain things. So lack of status, being addicted to something is shameful, obviously. Family relationships, if you don't,
I mean, we all have some form of, I don't know if dysfunction is too strong of a word, but there's always family drama. So. There's always family drama in every family, but we often feel ashamed that it's just our family.
Yep, and don't want to talk about it. And I'm not saying like
we talked about it on our first date.
But Brene Brown does talk about having that person that it's okay. You don't have to just tell everybody your stuff, but you have to have some kind of a circle that you're in where you can talk about.
And it's not necessarily family.
Yeah, not necessarily. Marriage and intimacy for sure. What we own or we don't own, things that we have are absolutely.
Yeah. Mental health.
Yeah, and physical health sometimes. Physical health,
yeah. Like, sometimes it's embarrassing.
Particularly like for me, religious situations where they equate physical or mental health with lack of faith or lack of you're not good enough or you're this.
You haven't prayed enough or you have some hidden sin in your life, so therefore there's a illness that's going on. Definitely shame about that.
Yeah. Facebook and social media are definite sources of shame.
Well, that's kind of status too, right?
Yeah. And relationships, friendships, and what's on your calendar can be a source of shame. Like, you don't have anything? Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are...
And people
I'm going here and I'm going there, and you're just quiet because you're kind of like it's a feeling of shame that you're... Mistakes or a lack of a perfect image can be, and I said parenthood before, but I really think that you have to separate that down into
the two.
There's a whole shame around being a mother, and I think that for someone who I'm around a lot of young mothers now in my life, and I am really tuned into the kinds of things that we say to each other as women and mothers that cause shame.
And next episode I'll get more into the fatherhood aspect of shame, because we'll do a little bit more on the gender stuff next episode.
I just feel what we do to each other as moms, shame wise, can be very terrible.
So was what.
So those were the things you may have some personal things that are more specific, but I was trying to give like a general, these are sort of the basic categories of shame that exist. I mean, school, marks for kids, like sports can be a place of shame. Physical working out, like that sort of stuff can be a source of shame. But the thing is, we heal through our connections with others. And one of the most important benefits of reaching out to others is learning that the experiences that make us feel most alone are actually happening to other people around us.
But it's so hard to reach out to others because you're locked in a cycle of shame.
Well, and shame it craves silence and secrecy.
Yeah.
So when you feel ashamed, you're quiet and you're usually secret about it because you don't want to blab it all over the place. And I mean, I would say that...
Well, and then I've made the mistake of sharing something that's a shame, but to the wrong person, and then it blows up.
And then it's worse, right? Because...
So then you learn, maybe not. And I think as kids, we learn pretty fast to withhold.
And shame also goes hand in hand with fear, which prevents us from being the best version of ourselves. And perfectionism is the friend of shame and fear.
Yeah, this is a whole nother layer.
And a growth mindset then is the enemy, right? Because if you can say, well, I'm not perfect, but I'm learning, I'm growing, and I know this is a silly example, but
there are no silly examples.
All right, there are no silly examples. But quilting is a good example of where perfectionism can make you feel. It is. What are you laughing at?
Because you're bringing it up half an hour later from a little quilting example.
Yeah, well, I get passionate about what I'm doing, but I don't care. But what I'm saying is being unwilling to share a project or something because it's not perfect.
Right.
Whereas if you have a growth mindset about what you're learning, it's the same thing about not wanting to take somebody a meal because it might not be
right.
Yeah,
well, that's the opposite of a growth mindset is the static one where
you're stuck.
You're stuck and you have to do things perfectly so you don't move forward.
No, and then it is discouraging to try a project if it has to be perfect. Because you can't make anything perfect. It's not.
And then there are certain people that, sorry to to trigger this. Remember, Pam baked a peach pie, and put pecans in it. Well, instead of being grateful and gracious and thankful, my mom said something. Well, who puts pecans in peach pie? So there's an example right away of somebody trying to shame you. So I don't know if we're getting into the
well, it's passive aggressive behavior. We do, but the idea is that shame traps us because it defines us, because we're not allowed to understand our difficulties and our trauma. But that's not who we are.
No.
And which is why I asked the question in the beginning, who are you beyond what you can do and what your labels are?
Well, and the thing is, labels, we mentioned, like the kind of generic labels that society gives us, job, gender, role in the family, whatever. But shame puts other labels.
Yes.
And we wear those even heavier.
Right. And you can validate difficulties and problems and trauma and still not be defined by them. I am not the bad things that have happened to me in my life.
But it's hard to walk away from the bad things that happen.
And I'm not the mistakes I have made.
No.
Because, that's where, we were talking about those levels of awareness as people, right? If you're stuck kind of at the bottom where everything is about, well, I've done this bad and I've done this bad and I've done this bad. And then you even kind of take responsibility for doing it bad, which is kind of a level 2 thing.
Well, level 1 is everybody else's
right
fault.
But level 2, you can get stuck in that, well, I'm responsible for this and I'm responsible, but in a heavy way, rather than, yes, I'm responsible for moving myself forward. But if you can get past those kind of where you're, 1, blaming everybody else, or 2, taking full responsibility, to the point where you're like, okay, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm this, I'm that, then you can actually rise above it and support other people who are kind of going through the same stuff you are.
Right.
And shame just traps us in that world where we think we're the only ones. And when we speak our shame to someone who deserves to hear it, then we reconnect and we begin to see where the message of shame is actually coming from.
And that's one thing I really took from Brené Brown's books or podcasts was sharing it with someone who deserves to hear it.
Right.
And the most recent example that in the one podcast was about the marble jar, where as people do things with you and you build trust, every little deed they do towards you that's kind and respectful and trust building, you put a marble in. So if they have
one of the things she was saying,
but if you blurt something to somebody who doesn't have a marble, doesn't have your best interest at heart, it's not.
Well, and then the other thing is, if you tell someone something and then it, particularly in work environments, and then all of a sudden you're aware that they have told somebody else, like keeping it in the vault, which is another phrase that she uses. Like when something's in the vault, you trust that that person isn't just going out to share whatever you've said.
Right.
And I think the other one that I've experienced a lot is where someone wants to know all about you and your issues, but they don't want to tell anything to you.
They shut down. They don't even volunteer it. And you can feel it just in the questioning way.
So I'm just like, okay, well, it has to be mutual. I'm not just going to spread out my life in front of you if you're not going to share something back. So
even if they are keeping confidences and everything, it's still a wall of where the trust breaks down.
So I think that's where we've learned a lot about, you can have people in your life that aren't like your deep whatever. You can have casual friendships and stuff, but you do need to have, like in Brene Brown's case, she says like she can think of 1 or 2 people in her life that she actually can.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have this group that you.
Like a big group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And I think one of the things that I've read a lot about is this idea of being critically aware as a strategy to fight shame. So being aware that someone else is trying to shame you is a way to fight shame. Mm-hmm. Like take a step back and say, whoa, like I really didn't do anything here. Why am I feeling? Mm-hmm. And analyze the situation a little bit instead of just taking it all on yourself and feeling shame.
One of the key things that I have learned recently is listen to the emotions. If you all of a sudden are snappish or irritable or weepy or what, not you, I mean if the person, if the listening audience.
I can be like
I was thinking about myself actually, but if you're short all of a sudden and you're in a situation and you can just hear it in your voice, whoa, why am I so short? It could be that you need to think and be critically aware of, are you being shamed at that moment? Or
do you have a reason to feel guilty, which is a good segue into what we were talking about next, because guilt and shame are not the same thing.
And guilt isn't always bad.
No, guilt isn't always bad. Guilt is the feeling you get when you've really done something wrong or perceived you've done something wrong. And shame is the feeling that you are wrong. Right. And it may not be related to anything specific.
Exactly.
So when you feel guilty about something you did, you can take steps to make up for it and put it behind you. You can go to somebody and said, man, I really messed up. I'm so sorry that I made you feel bad. And I think that this is a big problem in the world. I don't think people can do that. But feeling shame or being convinced...
That's a whole nother episode, is apologies.
Yeah. Or being convinced that you are the thing that's wrong. There's no way to come back from that.
No.
And so that's one really big difference between guilt and shame. But guilt is actually feeling remorse or responsibility for something you've done wrong. And that's okay. Right. That's okay. I'm going like this because he's got to move down so I can just at least see my bullet points here. And it always relates to something specific, a mistake you've made or an offense. Yes. Guilt. Mm-hmm. Like you've hurt somebody, whether you've hurt them intentionally or unintentionally. And I always said that as a leader, when you're a leader, particularly in a school setting, you're moving at lightning speed all the time, making decisions.
Making 20
so
decisions
if I've unintentionally offended you, then you have to be able to come to me and say, hey, that really hurt my feelings when you did that. So I can say, I'm really sorry that I did that. I'm just sorry that I did it. Mm-hmm. And I'll be...
And that's another thing that we are, as in general, as a society, not good at, is trying to clear the air when we feel offended. Instead, we bury it, we get revengeful, we hang on to grudges, or we go and gossip.
Well, and I think the other thing is, I've had some experience where I've tried to have that conversation with some people, and where I've tried to say, hey, that really hurt my feelings, and I've gotten even more crapped on.
So maybe it's hard, though, because then it's a cycle.
But you can't let yourself... you can't. I
think it's probably ultimately better to go and say you hurt my feelings.
Well, then you find out the truth about that person
and whether
their true character,
whether you continue,
there, and whether you continue at that level of a relationship. And shame is just feeling that you're bad, worthy of contempt, inadequate, and so you relate your behavior or self, it's related to you as all your behavior or yourself, in relation usually to other people's opinions and not...
I think it's like putting on virtual reality goggles and headphones, because it's not just the glasses you're looking through, it's also the the sound waves, you're filtering it through. It's as if you're in this alternate reality, and you filter everything through that shame.
And sometimes it happens because of the way you were raised, right? Because from the day you're born, you're learning to feel whether you're okay, whether you're accepted. Your self-esteem is shaped by whether you're praised or criticized or loved or disciplined or taken care of or neglected.
Yeah.
And so people...
I remember when we were early on, before we were parents, we were reading about, raising children and not bestowing labels and names and identities upon our own kids, as, like you are a... good, or you are a bad, whatever the labels are, and also it said like teachers have so much clout and say especially in the elementary school years, in high school too, but mostly in high school it's your peers that start saying, and then you adopt a lot of what your peers say about you.
Well, and then you start feeling that you're inadequate and inferior, and then that's where shame comes from.
Yep.
But like over time, if that's all that happens to you, then your self-image and your self-esteem and feelings of shame come from what other people think of you a lot of the time.
Say they think of you.
Yes, say they think of you. And then this is where there's been some focus in the research on serotonin and how that...
you mean the connection between brain chemistry and shame?
And that low levels of serotonin can actually contribute to you feeling more feelings, leading to feelings of shame because you're more submissive.
Do they know if it's chicken or egg? Like if you feel shame,
I don't know.
Does it lower your serotonin?
I'd have to look more deeply into it. Evidence is increasing that serious problems occur when shame gets deeply woven. And because what does it lead to? It obviously leads to suicide and like all kinds of mental health problems, anxiety and everything. So one of the things that you can do is increase your serotonin. Like one of the things you can do, even if you are just an anxious person, having increasing your serotonin is one way to help your brain handle cope, right?
So and what are some ways that we can increase serotonin?
You can eat whole wheat bread and turkey or cheese and oatmeal.
Eat whole wheat bread.
No, nuts, salmon and brown rice, plums, pineapple, pretzel sticks with peanut butter, milk. Like those are not hard things to eat, but those are the kinds of snacks.
Not very keto or paleo friendly. No, wait.
No, but
because basically carbs are part of increasing serotonin.
But those are good carbs.
Nuts and salmon are good.
Yeah, turkey and protein. There's quite a bit of protein.
Yeah, no.
And I mean, and exercise, getting your heart rate up.
Go for a walk.
Yeah, bright light, sunlight, spending time outside. Vitamin D, I think, is probably a good way, like a supplement. And apparently massage, because it helps your serotonin. And it's good. It's known also for promoting good sleep.
Having good serotonin levels.
Yeah.
Yes.
And your appetite will be more regular, and your learning and your memory and positive feelings and pro-social behavior. So like all those things, and of course if we're not sleeping well, then shame,
it kind of cycles.
Yeah, it's all cycles, right? But people with low serotonin have more anxiety, they're irritable, they can be aggressive, they have sleep issues, impulsivity, decreased appetite, even digestive issues like nausea, and they crave sweets and carbohydrate-rich foods. So there's good carbohydrates and there's bad carbohydrates, right? Like brown rice, there's all kinds of varieties of brown rice. We eat a whole bunch of different varieties. Yes. We eat some kind of
black rice, red rice, Manitoba wild rice. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things that you can do. So that's about just a little, insert there about serotonin, and that you can actually do something physically about it.
Right.
By exercising and getting sunlight and whatever.
And not just go the pharmaceutical route right away.
No.
Or in isolation.
I would say that if you feel you're struggling with shame, anxiety, and all those things, that probably the first thing that I would do is see a very good naturopath. I mean, we have Carrie
Rongitz.
And she's located in
the Niagara region.
Hill in the Niagara region, but she does a lot of online consulting now.
Yes.
So, but I would say
and soon to be mobile clinic.
And I would also say that you can get bad
what?
Naturopaths.
Yes.
That are a little cray-cray, but a good balance, like finding a really good, strong family doctor and a good naturopath are an excellent mix.
Yes. And while we're giving Carrie a shout out, she works to complement your doctor's treatments and whatever, not to fight against your doctor. So it's very refreshing, the whole approach.
And then shame and expectations, right, are a whole thing. So expectations entangle us, like our social and our community and our family expectations. We need to build empathy and understanding over having expectation, and then we'll be resilient to shame by recognizing our triggers to shame and then naming them.
We need this to be more concrete. I need a good example.
Well, when you expect certain things from or when the community expects certain things from you, and you don't do it, then, or you're expecting somebody to do something and they don't, and so it all just becomes
I have a perfect little example, which I won't get into too much, but it'll segue into next episode. So in the community where we live, or particularly 25 years ago when I was a full-time stay-at-home dad, it's very much hockey town. The guys are pretty much I don't know what you would...
Changing now with
it's
people
changing. Well, that's what I mean.
But
20 years ago.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely.
You know, industrial, hardworking, a man's man. You know, they think of the Ford truck advertisements and the Marlboro cowboy, that type of guy. So...
Not quite that bad, but... Okay, that was your perception. I can't change...
Anyway, the expectation the expectation on me as a stay-at-home dad, because I was proud to wear that label. Right. But the shaming would happen by looking, by comments, passive aggressively. Yes,
and people kind of feeling that you weren't...
And both women saying things like, "Oh, so your wife isn't really all that well supported then."
And you know what? The other one that I thought of was when we were taking that course online, and it was about a sewing machine, a little.
Oh yeah.
And there was a man, and all of a sudden
a new quilter.
Oh, are you like nobody went on and on about any of the women that were there to learn about their sewing machines.
No.
But all of a sudden there was this man, and it was like that there was something amazing, because it's not a community or social expectation that men would sew or be creative or own a sewing machine. So I think we have to build some empathy and understanding.
So there I would say I felt shame.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know how that guy felt, but I felt for him. I was like,
I was there too, and I wanted to say, "Hey, buddy,
yeah,
ignore this."
But it is, and it's the same thing. Like when you and I are sitting on a bench in knitting or crocheting, and somebody's like, "Oh, well," they don't really look at me crocheting, and in fact, I'm the one that came to it much later. Yeah. Like I'm not even as skilled, but if he is, well then, wow, why do you like? When did you start doing that? It's just people can
and. They'll ask her whether she taught me, which is cute.
Well, and I think the other one where shame is a big thing is when you think about holiday season coming up, and people start asking, "Oh, so when are you getting together with your kids, or what are you doing, or how's whatever?" And for some people, that's shame-inducing because maybe they're not seeing their kids.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not happening. Maybe they're alone on Christmas. Mm-hmm. Like, so, I mean...
So we really have to work on these expectations and rather than have expectations, be empathetic.
Yes. And talk about whatever and instead of saying, oh, when are you getting together with your kids for Christmas? It's more of like, what are you doing around the Christmas season? Do you have any free time? Because maybe you could step in and fill in a gap, or maybe the two groups of people could actually make plans, because I think there's a lot more people that sit alone at Christmas with just their family, which is fine, than you would realize, or parents of grown kids that aren't with their kids at Christmas. Mm-hmm. So, and I think there's ways that we can be empathetic and understanding instead of just falling into that thing where we're triggering shame and upsetting people, or making people feel bad for no reason. And that's what shame is about, making people feel bad for no reason. And I think just to end off this, because we're going to talk quite a bit about shame, mm-hmm. The 5 important truths that I have learned is that pain is just part of life, everybody's life. So you've got to learn to live with that, and you come out wiser and stronger and truer and better, and if you embrace that at its fullest. So if you're feeling like shame because you have pain or a hard time or something, then that is hard, because then you're not going to embrace it and move past it. Mm-hmm. So, and the only reason that it becomes a thing is that because people do that to you. Yeah. Because everybody has this. Everybody has something going on in their life that is painful.
And the thing, though, that happens, to move to the next point, is because it has happened, then fear also takes root. And then you start rehearsing new imaginary conversations or new situations, and you're so fearful. It's all imagination. So, you have to really realize that fear is just a feeling at the moment. It actually isn't the thing that's in the future.
Because the present is all we have to deal with, and so we have to kind of revel in the present and not, worry too much about the past, and kind of allow the future to unfold. And that's where expectations come in, right? Yeah. If we have this and we this and we this, and then it doesn't unfold, then you're sad, or you're shamed, or you're this. And perception is everything. If you believe you can overcome things, you'll put your best, and you might just do it. You might fail too, but failure is part of life, right? So, and you're never truly alone. So we have to...
and the other thing is, you don't know... There's more than 2 pathways to overcome a situation.
Absolutely.
It's not just this and this. There's other things in between.
And if you can't find somebody who can empathetically listen to you and just listen to what you're going through and just say, yeah, I can, I'm hearing you, instead of,
you kind of have to try that on with different people.
Yeah.
You do have to take small risks. Don't divulge the worst things, but... Take small risks, because some people that are listening to this might actually feel quite alone and not have a network at all.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, I think we get wound up if somebody says, oh, why don't you do this? Or, oh, I had that happen to me and I did this. And people get upset. Well, I don't understand that.
Oh, like when they say, my situation, the comparative shame.
Yeah. But the other thing is, though, if I'm sharing a problem, it has to be an expectation at some level that somebody is going to come back and say, well, why don't you try this? Or have you thought about this?
Yeah, give some advice.
And so that's okay. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you have to go do it.
No, but you don't have to get angry that the advice is being offered.
And freak out, because I've had that happen to me. And bottom line is, you're never truly alone. You have to rise above self-defeat, and you'll find that everyone is always struggling with something at a given point, even though their Facebook page looks perfect, or their Instagram page, or they're this, or they're that. Mm-hmm. Because that's, I think, one of our biggest problems with shame, is just that you can present this look that is whatever. And
so a little challenge I want to leave with you, because I mean, I guess Christmas is on its way, but I'm reminded of a story I heard at Christmas time of because everybody is struggling with something at a given point. When you're out in public, particularly if you're shopping, and you see somebody struggling with little kids or alone and sad, it's the struggle is obviously there, but you don't know what other layers of shame and guilt they're struggling with at that time. So it's kind of more, you know, be patient with the screaming child and the frustrated parent, and be patient with the rude and abrupt senior who's, you know.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like, you know, you're standing in line with your stuff to pay for it, and some young mother is behind you. Can't you just say, go ahead and go forward, because you can get out of here with your kids, and maybe that'll decrease your stress a little? Yeah. Right? There's so many things that we can do when we actually think we're not the only ones struggling with everything. Things are way more common. Everybody is experiencing a lot. You know, there's a saying that says, everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And that is a very true saying. So this is our kind of, I don't know if I put what I was going to do next week at the bottom or not. But this is kind of our beginning to talking about shame. And I thought that next week we would talk about
gender, you said.
Gender. So how like shame is different for women and for men. So thank you for joining us at No Room for Phonies.
Episode 52.
And sort of our little foray into what we have learned about shame, and how rising above shame and naming and shaming your shame can help you be a better version of yourself, live your best life. So thank you for joining us at No Room for Phonies, things we have learned about shame.
Good night.